In this video, I'll be discussing Coco, Chanel, and Igor Stravinsky, a 2009 French film directed by Jan Conan. Specifically, I'll be discussing why it's not a biography, its characterization of Coco and Igor, and an example of a scene where their relationship is defined by the music in the film. The film revolves around two characters, Coco and Igor, and unpacks their rumored love affair in the summer of 1920. Much like Kant had his own test for a genius, I think it's worth examining a similar test for what makes a film like this and what doesn't make it biographical. The only biographical component I really saw in this film was that it focused on a 7-year span in Coco and Igor's lives. It establishes a timeline from the first moment they saw each other in 1913 through Russian uprisings to the moment they rekindled their relationship in 1920 to the return of the Rite of Spring. In this way, the film kind of reminds me of Amadeus in that it took two characters' lives where they intersected and built on a story that may or may not have actually happened. Still, there's more merit in examining the basis of this film, which is the relationship between Chanel and Igor and the essence of both of their characters. This film arguably captures some of the most public successes in both of their lives, Chanel No. 5 and The Rite of Spring, but it fails to mention their rise to fame or the first moments they actually got interested in their respective trades. Also, because its premise is on an unverifiable love affair, I argue that this film is not a biography. Going on into the characterization, starting with Coco, much like her biographies describe her, in this film, she's portrayed as a tall, beautiful, independent, forthright woman. She commands every space she enters, and with the cinematography that's continuously revolving around her character and the costumes that are revealing her silhouette and her figure, we focus on the fact that she is this fashion icon. She's always distinguishable from those around her, always setting a standard for beauty and elegance, and even making grief look chic. More specifically, she's pictured wearing black for almost every scene in the film, except the first when she's still in love with Boy Kapow, and later on in the film when she's falling for Igor. In this film, we see her, as she's described, powerful, independent, successful, woman of no regret. She claims she's as powerful as Igor, but more successful, and the only times we see her remotely vulnerable are when she's grieving the loss of her late lover boy. The only times we see her not wearing black and white are when she goes to Grasse to find her perfume and continuously wears orange while formulating Chanel No. 5, so she adds that to her color palette. Igor Stravinsky, in contrast, is depicted as a fool that can't decide between two women. He won't leave his wife and children for Chanel and vice versa. He's undoubtedly a mastermind of his trade, but I'd say that even in his outbursts, he acts more dependent on his music and the women in his life. Despite living and working in Paris in an attic before meeting Chanel, supporting his 4 children and his ailing wife, he really only thinks about his music, and he's too prideful to think about any financial assistance, especially from Chanel. Unlike Chanel, who dominates the visuals of this film, Stravinsky kind of commands the musical components. Musically, we see a change in his persona with the development of his relationship with Coco. His music, as his wife calls him out for, becomes more passionate. Every scene we see with him and Coco features this passionate, diegetic sound, either piano or complete silence when they're having relations in each of these scenes. The first scene after their first night together actually features some of the music from The Rite of Spring, and maybe this kind of attributes to their passion and the energy that you constantly feel between them, especially towards the beginning of the film. So the last scene I'll examine is the last intimate scene between Coco and Igor, which is sort of after this back and forth urge to spend a night together, and Igor finally says he can't when Chanel asks him to spend a night together in Paris. And this film is filmed with a non-diegetic underscore and a shot that revolves around both of the characters. This is the same shot that's repeated throughout the film, often showing both of these characters individually and reflecting some of their internal conflicts. So Chanel's difficulty letting go of Boy and Igor's difficulty managing his affair. It's this scene that really shows the genius of both characters, and while it's one of the most intimate scenes visually, it shows how different these characters actually are, how they could be so close and so different at the same time. The rest of the film tries to show their likeness, that they both start with the fabric and the notes, and they build their creations from essentially nothing. But it isn't until this scene that we realize that they don't really know or understand one another. Igor thinks of himself as an artist, and Chanel as a shopkeeper, and Chanel doesn't really respect him, but she respects his music, which is why she invests in it. It's this moment that we realize that Igor and Coco, they aren't really an entity, they aren't a couple, and they were never meant to be. They are instead two individual artists with two completely different trades.